Our guest today is the President of the Illinois Senate. He was elected to the General Assembly in 1979 and served in the Illinois House for 12 years. In 1992, he was elected to the Illinois Senate. 1 year ago, our guest today was inaugurated to his first two-year term as President of the Illinois Senate. In this capacity, our guest today led the Illinois Senate, and many of you were here because it was the morning of, during the impeachment trial and removal of former Governor Rod Blagojevich. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago, the President of the Illinois Senate, John Cullerton. Mr. President. Thank you. Have some fun up here.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am the President of the Senate, but the Speaker of my House is Pam Cullerton, who's right here. I'm also honored to have our colleague Kwame Raoul here, State Senator Kwame Raoul. And I'm very honored to have my counterpart on Republican side, Senator Christine Radogno. Thank you very much for coming today. Christine and I earlier asked if we could ask the media to please leave so that we could have a secret meeting here. But unfortunately, Jay said no, so I guess we'll just have to watch what I say since the media will be here. It's an honor for me to be at the City Club because over 100 years, the top business, civic, religious, and political leaders are here who are well informed, certainly usually better informed than the average Illinois citizen. And so what I want to talk about today, of course, is our state budget. And I was planning on saying that for the most part I've noticed, traveling throughout the state, that the Chicago media market doesn't cover the state government as much as the media markets outside, and that it's very difficult to talk about the problems of our state when a lot of people don't know just exactly what the state does. And that's why I was really delighted this morning when I got my newspaper and I saw the Sun-Times. Front page story about how bad off we are. And if you get a chance to read it, it's excellent. It's accurate. And they even kind of apologize. They say, our state's financial troubles, dry and boring as the subject may seem upon first blush, may be the local news story of the year, one that none of us can afford to ignore. So I really do applaud them for doing this. I hope they do more, because it'll make our job a lot easier. So let me tell you what I want to talk about today. First of all, the Illinois budget crisis, how I believe we got here, what we've done in Springfield to try to fix the problem. I'd like to talk about the upcoming governor's race, and also some proposals for going forward and what we can do to make it better. Let's talk about the budget crisis. We had to borrow money to pay our bills this year. At the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th, we need to pay back $2.2 billion. Then starting July 1st, for the next fiscal year, we are going to be just short of $13 billion. Now this is where we have a general revenue fund of $26 billion. We're $13 billion in debt. What does that $13 billion make up? How is it made up? Next year we have to pay into our pension funds $4.2 billion. Last year, instead of paying into our pension fund with general revenue funds, we borrowed the money. And we have to start paying that loan back, which will be another $800 million. Our revenues, our income, is short by about $1 billion from what we thought it was going to be. We're going to lose our federal stimulus monies that we got from the federal government, probably. That's $1.8 billion. And then if we wanted to pay all our bills on time, we only need $5 billion. So it's close to $13 billion. Now, how we got here is really important. We had, at our secret meeting last week in Springfield, the National Conference of State Legislators, who presented to the senators. They pointed out, and this is a bipartisan group, represents all the states, that we have undergone the longest economic downturn since 1929. 49 states have a combined $174 billion deficit, and it's increased this last year by $28 billion. They called it the state's revenue nightmare. Now, the state of Illinois has had the same problem. Our revenue, our tax receipts, are down $3 billion in just 2 years. And there's been an 11% drop from 1 year ago. So maybe you figure our problem has been in spending. The Federal Bureau of Economic Analysis says we're 45th in the nation in spending as a percentage of the gross domestic product. Adjusted for inflation, spending over the last 10 years has been flat. Now, there's some areas that have been up and some areas have been down. I'd like to just walk you through this and divide it into 6 basic areas of spending, or of state government. The actual operation of state government, human services, higher education, early childhood, primary and secondary education, health care, and of course pensions. Now, let's just start with state government. In the year 2000, we had 81,000 state employees. Last year, we had 70,000 state employees. We have the lowest ratio of state employees to population in the nation. The lowest ratio of state employees to population in the nation. And all the spending for all the operations of state government is only 15% of our total. We spend money in the area of human services. Give some examples. Children and adults with mental disabilities. Home care for seniors to help keep them from going into more expensive nursing homes. Child care for working families, since there's no more public assistance. We said, you got to go to work, we'll take care of your kids. That's where we spend money on human services. That money, that spending has been down the last 10 years. Higher education, we have reduced the money we spend on higher education, and as a result, we've had major tuition increases at our universities and community colleges. Now, in the area where we've increased spending in the last 10 years would be early childhood, elementary, and secondary education. Back in 2001, a board was created, Educational Funding and Advisory Board, called EFAB, which recommends the appropriate spending levels per pupil. We've not yet reached those goals, but adjusted for inflation, we have increased over the last 10 years our spending for education in that area by $420 million. The next area, healthcare, of course, not surprisingly, has been the area where we've had the biggest growth. Since 2000, we've increased our healthcare spending by, after adjusted for inflation, again, $1.6 billion. But that increase has actually been less than the private sector healthcare increases. And as the private sector drops people from healthcare, the state has to pick up some of those uninsured. And finally, the area of pensions. Since 1982, we started underfunding our pension system, our 5 pension funds that we're responsible for. We started putting in less than we were paying out since 1982. So we'll all take blame for it. It was Republican governors, Democratic legislatures, such that today the Pew Research Foundation reports that our underfunded pensions are the worst in the nation. But the last 10 years, we have been catching up. And so as a result, we have increased our payments 180% over 10 years ago. And thus, we have next year, out of our $26 billion general funds budget, a requirement to pay $4.2 billion. So what have we done to try to address this crisis? First of all, you may not have read this in the paper, but we actually cut the budget last year by $2.2 billion, and we authorized the governor to cut another billion. We even cut legislative salaries by 5%. You probably didn't read that in the paper. And we also raised revenues. In the Senate passed a bill that would have brought in an extra $4.3 billion, even though our budget deficit is closer to $13 billion. This, of course, was meant to stabilize the budget, but also to prevent further job losses in our state. Our income tax is the lowest rate in the nation. And we're one of two states, only two states, that exempts retirement income. And our sales tax, the part that the state gets, not Todd Stroger, the part that the state gets is 5%. And we have big exemptions. We do not tax any services like other states, and we have big exemptions for food and medicine. But those taxes didn't pass the House. So we were forced to borrow. We borrowed from two sources. We borrowed from banks to pay our pension obligation, and we borrowed from our vendors. We just borrowed from the people we do business with by not paying our bills. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could blame all this on Rod Blagojevich? Wouldn't that be nice? We can blame a lot on Rod Blagojevich, let me tell you, and that would be the subject perhaps of another luncheon. But the global crisis, the economic global crisis, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But many people have said, let's just roll back the stuff that Rod did, and we'll be back to even. Governor Blagojevich was responsible for passing some bills and some rules, and many of the senators voted for, to expand the eligibility for health care. So we looked at rolling those back. Let's just cut. It turns out that all of those expansions, if we eliminated all of them, we would save $300 million. Not $13 billion, $300 million. And of course, this year, if we did that, we would lose $1.3 billion in federal matching dollars. 1.6 million people would no longer be covered. 300,000 of them are children. So that's not a solution. So I would like to talk just briefly about the race for governor. I think it's fair to say, all of us in this room, that in the past, we've had some problems with electing certain candidates without asking tough questions for governor, lieutenant governor, other positions. So I think it would be very wise for us to take a real close look at this race for governor. Now, I'm just going to assume that my colleague, Senator Brady, who's the presumptive nominee since he's ahead, is going to be the candidate. So first of all, let me just point out that there's a few things. Maybe many of you don't know Senator Brady very well, but I can tell you this. I disagree with him on a number of major issues. For example, I passed a bill, I was the chief sponsor of a bill that said we cannot discriminate against gays in the workplace or in housing. Senator Brady put a bill in to repeal that, so that apparently thinking you can discriminate against those folks. We have a law in Illinois that says that felons and people with mental disorders cannot obtain firearms because they have to get a firearm owner's identification card. He put a bill in to repeal firearm owner's identification card. He also wants to legalize the ability to carry loaded guns concealed on your body as you go about the state. He has said that climate change is not caused by human activity, and creationism should be taught in our schools. So I disagree with him on those issues, but that's not what I want to talk about today. That'll be for another time. This is really interesting, and we did the research on this. This is the first time since 1906, since 1904, so 106 years, that a sitting member of the legislature is running for governor. So for 106 years, candidates have said, send me to Springfield, I'll clean up that mess. But this year, whether it's Brady or Dillard, he's already in the room. He's in the legislature. We have this ability to work with the guy who expects to be the governor. He's not an outsider, Senator Brady. He's been there for 16 years. So he has got a record that we can look at. Now, any senator can introduce legislation. They can introduce their own budget. So I think since he wants to be the governor for the second half of this fiscal year, we should not wait until after the election to find out what his views are on the budget. So we only have some of his statements during the campaign where he talked about what he would do with our budget. And I know this is going to come as a surprise to you, but some of these statements are contradictory. So I'd like you to take a look at them. He said, first of all and foremost, he's going to balance this budget without a tax increase. And he also said he wants to lower certain taxes and fees so that we would lose or not bring in $1 billion. So we'll start off with a $14 billion budget deficit under the Brady administration. So he said, though, publicly, that he would just cut $7.5 billion. Well, $7.5 billion doesn't make up for 14, but when you look at how he was going to cut the $7.5 billion, he said it would be easy. We'll just cut 10% across the board. But 10% across the board is only $2.6 billion. And his 10% cuts across the board, they don't apply to certain areas, like pensions. He doesn't want to do a pension holiday. In fact, even last year, we were debating how to restore $400 million in funding for the MAP program, very popular program where we provide money for college scholarships. He stood up and gave a speech, said, can't cut this program. This is really important, $400 million. So apparently that wouldn't be subject to the 10% cuts. So I think it's going to be a very interesting session and a very interesting campaign to find out what his proposals will be if he's elected. Now, there are some things that we should brag about and we should tell you that are going to make things better. First of all, we passed a jobs bill this past year, and it had been 10 years. And to me, it was my number one priority. It was symbolic of the dysfunctionality in Springfield, the fact that we didn't have a jobs bill. And so in 10 weeks, we passed something which hadn't been done in 10 years. And we did it by cooperating with Senator Radogno, Senator Cross, Speaker Madigan. They came to my office, we sat down, and we compromised. And it's not easy. And I give the Republicans full credit because we had to raise some revenues to pay off these bonds. And we did, and everybody worked together. Not everybody got 100% of what they wanted. That's what compromise is all about. But this bill will create over 400,000 jobs. In the next 3 years, we're going to fix our schools, our roads, our bridges, our hospitals, clean up the environment. And to put it in perspective, this same National Conference of State Legislators told us at our secret meeting last week that there were $39 billion worth of total stimulus packages passed throughout the entire United States last year by the states, and 31 billion of it came from Illinois. So it was really an accomplishment that, again, I don't think very many people even know about. But we're going to have construction work going on spring, summer, and fall here in Illinois, and it's going to put people back to work. But I think we can do more this year. We need to do even more economic development by targeting tax credits for small businesses where most of the private sector jobs are created. I believe we can spend more money to increase venture capital funding for fast-growing startup corporations and perhaps direct some job credits for enterprise zones. And I also believe that we can better spend the money that we do spend in a wiser manner. If we adopt better measures to prevent waste and mismanagement that has occurred in state government in the past, we should require performance-based audits of third-party vendors and state agencies to make sure that the money is spent efficiently. And finally, we have to deal with the pension problem. Now, there's two real important points to make that some people don't fully appreciate. Our Constitution protects benefits for all retirees and current employees of our state pension system. Therefore, any changes we make only apply to people who haven't been hired yet, much less retired. And our goal is, of course, to have retirement security and a stable pension system. So I would propose, and again, we look forward to working with Republicans on this, that we have two improvements to the current system. As our life expectancy increases, we should raise the age of eligibility when retirees can obtain full retirement benefits. And secondly, we have individuals who can now retire and receive as much as $245,000 annually. That number has to be lowered. These two changes alone can save Illinois payments into the system over the next 35 years, $120 billion. And they will clearly change and improve our standing among credit rating agencies. So, last year, we dealt with the impeachment trial. We came together, I got sworn in, I got elected and sworn in, and an hour later we started a trial. We, I think, conducted ourselves in a bipartisan way and responsible way. Then, within 10 weeks, we passed a jobs bill that would put 400,000 people to work, invest $31 billion in the next 3 years. Then we dealt with the fact that we had a crisis in income. We dealt with the revenue side. This year, we need to pass pension reforms, economic development improvements. We may have to further cut our state budget, but I look forward to bipartisan cooperation with the Republicans to help solve this crisis. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So if you have questions, we want to get them up here, please. Two other people we forgot to mention earlier, Christy LaFleur from the governor's office, and also Suzette McKenna from Commissioner of Environment from City of Chicago. Thank you. Questions, please? Thanks. So our first question, Mr. President, comes from Stephen Condren. Fortune 500 companies are on the fast track to leave Illinois. What tax incentives can be augmented, augmented to reverse this trend?
Well, I've already talked about how we have one of the lowest taxing states in the nation. However, if we were to increase certain revenues in the income tax, we certainly could target tax credits along the same way. I personally think that what businesses really want is stability in government, and to have a strong credit rating, and to have an educated workforce and an excellent infrastructure, and that's what we've been working on. And so I think that will be what we need to make sure that our businesses stay in Illinois.
Our next question's from, is it Robin Stearns? Robin Staines, I'm sorry. Where's Robin? Okay, thank you. What is the chance that we can lift the constitutionality mandated flat tax?
Actually, it does take a constitutional amendment. We do have a flat tax. It's 3% for individuals. The bill that we passed last year raised it to 5% and kept corporations at 5% as well. But it also included an increase in the personal exemption. It included an increase in the earned income tax credit. It included a tremendous increase in the deduction you take for your property taxes. It gave more money back to local governments so that the increase their pressure on increasing their property taxes would be decreased. So it was a fairly progressive increase, in my opinion. If members of this General Assembly want to put on the ballot a proposal to have a progressive income tax, that's something we can debate and take up. But it's difficult. We need a 3/5 vote in both chambers. It has to be approved by the electorate. But without having done that, the General Assembly, we've already done it in the Senate. The House could take up this bill, this revenue increase bill that we're talking about this year without that constitutional amendment.
Our next question comes from Tony Licata. Where's Tony? Okay. You alluded to the pension system. Why can't we have a 401K for state employees starting tomorrow for every state employee?
Defined contribution versus defined benefit. First of all, we have to pass this pension reform. So we need the votes to pass it. What I propose is something I think is passable. There's a couple of examples in other states that have gone to a defined contribution, and they actually didn't find that it saved as much money. We have some real complications because of Social Security in our pension system. Rather than get into a debate with the unions about this whole matter, I come back to those two proposals. Those two proposals are where the money's at. It's, I bet you, 85% of what the Civic Federation would call for, and I think that's what we should focus on.
Our next question is from Suzanne Malik McKenna. Can you unpack that figure, saving $12 billion over 12 years through increase in retirement? Okay. And lowering pension payouts, what roles do unions play?
Well, remember, if we make changes to the pension formula, the savings is in the future. There is a present-day value of that savings. I don't know that we can capture any of it for the first few years. If we can, we would certainly try to do so. But we have to do it for the long term. There's no question about it. It's unsustainable. And it would immediately send the right signals to our credit agencies. So even though we have this big, huge deficit that we're facing right now, we do expect, obviously, the economy to turn around. Maybe it might be a year or two, in which case we will have more revenues to help pay down this debt. But as far as these changes to the pension system, it's not as immediate, but it does have the definitely long-term benefits.
Our next question's from Sharon Alter. Where's Sharon? Okay. When do you expect income tax increase to pass with Illinois HR, with the House Speaker Madigan's support this year?
Well, first of all, we did pass the bill in the Senate. We have a little bit different situation in the Senate because we have a number of us are not up for election this year, whereas in the House, everyone's up for election. And so it's really going to depend on what the House does. I can tell you this. There's been 4 income tax increases votes in Illinois. Every one of them was a bipartisan vote in the past. In 69, 85, 89, and 91. So I think that this is a crisis unheard of in our lifetime. We're asking for bipartisan support the way we did when we worked on the capital bill. We hope we can do the same thing to work on the budget in both houses.
And finally, I want to also note that we have Representative Sarah Feigenholtz here, please.
Right. My state representative.
Yes. And with that, we are done. First of all, we have a City Club mug for you.
Doesn't break the gift band.
No, you can have that. And we also have a certificate for a 1-year membership to City Club for you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
And also a book on the history of the City Club for you to read in your spare time if you have any. At that, thank you. We're adjourned and look forward to seeing you again.
That's my tough question.
Yeah.